Anyway, so questions, comments. Don't complain because I'm not getting paid. Yes, sir.
My education is scientific, so that when I was younger, I didn't really study as much about sociology and certain aspects of history maybe as I should have. But now that I've retired, I read some other things that sort of broaden out my education from that standpoint.
Good.
And it also means that I live in a world that has different languages for different people, so I see the difficulty with people talking to one another when they're using words that don't really mean quite the same thing. Well, one thing that I did recently that maybe I should have done 50 or 60 years ago is I had about I had a book that contained about a 200-page excerpt from the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels. And when I read it, I really was quite surprised at it. Anybody who hasn't read it, most people here probably had, but I was quite surprised. It was written in 1848, number one. That Marx had a very, very good understanding of the interaction of a lot of social things. He really seemed to understand a lot of things pretty well. When you read the second part of this, which was probably written by Engels, their technique of taking over a country was what was so scary. They suggested find dissension in the country.
Right.
It doesn't matter too much which side you get on. Get on some side to create social disorder and social conflicts, and then push your agenda later on.
Lenin followed up on that, by the way, by saying that a true revolutionary doesn't have to worry about what comes next.
Right.
He just has to destroy the structures that are in place.
Right, exactly. And then all these words like that sound so good. Social justice, progressivism. Those sound like great things to have, but
absolutely.
we're talking about different languages here. So.
Well, that's why, again, Francis Schaeffer, one of the great influences in my life, always said, before you begin a discussion, define your terms so that everybody will know what it is you mean. Because you could say, you could take a word and go around in a group and get 15 different definitions. So always define your words first. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I like to say that freedom is not the natural state of humanity. Otherwise, everyone would be free. Freedom has to be fought for. It's like your immune system that protects you from most viruses. It has to keep pushing them away and defeating them, or they will consume you, as they ultimately will when you die. Your body, anyway. So you look around the world and you see religious oppression, you see political oppression, you see economic oppression, and I found that. And as I look around the world, there are three common denominators to failed societies and cultures. One is the wrong political system, lack of freedom and parties, people able to vote for whomever they wish. One person, one vote. The wrong economic system, not capitalism, and giving people incentive to go out and take risks and build something that they can keep for themselves. And the wrong religious system, the idea that there's an angry God who doesn't want you to enjoy this life at all, and to kill everybody else who doesn't agree exactly with you. So those three things are usually common in one form or another, and you can substitute the last one for atheism for that if you want. But those are usually, I found, the three things that are in common in every culture. Right. Now the other thing that puts a nation in danger is trying to accommodate everything, and trying to be so broad-minded that, or open-minded that their brains fall out. And I fear that that's what we're experiencing now. We are so unsure and uncertain of what we believe in that we don't want to tell anybody, especially the immigrants coming here, that yes, the reason you came here is that you perceive this as a better system, so we want to teach it to you so you'll fully embrace it. We now say, well, you can come with your agendas and you can be hyphenated Americans. You don't have to be fully Americans. I don't quote Whoopi Goldberg very often, but when she said a few years ago, I think it was on The View, which I'm sure you know I'm a regular viewer of, she said, I'm not an African American, I'm an American. I love that. People left their countries and cultures to come here, particularly at the turn of the 20th century, because they believed this country offered them a better life. They wanted to assimilate. They wanted to learn English. They certainly wanted their kids to learn it, and they wanted them to be fully Americans. Now we don't have that. We're somehow embarrassed that we are wealthy. We're embarrassed that we're powerful. But the reason we are is because we have lived by and embraced certain principles that are for all time. We want to share these with other nations. We don't want to be alone in it, and that's why we go to other places, sometimes in an incorrect manner in my judgment, but to try to help other people be free as we are. That's the difference between America and most of the rest of the world. So yeah, and you know, that old line by Santayana, those who don't learn anything from history are doomed to repeat it. And I fear that every generation has to be retaught that in America. Yes, sir.
Well, I first saw that newspaper you held up, I saw that in the box the other day. I thought that guy was crying because we're in trouble 17 digits.
Yeah, yeah. Got a picture of Congressman Weiner on here. Yeah, that was a separate story. Yeah, unfortunately. I never hear another Weiner joke. I'll be happy. Any students that are in here? Okay, yes, sir, in the back.
Speaking of going to other lands, what do you see as the end game in Afghanistan?
Wow. Well, if I knew, of course, I'd be a prophet or a seer or whatever. I don't. Well, let me back up before I answer that specifically. I'm kind of an unlikely conservative on this, I guess, because I think we need to have a very serious debate again. And I've quoted George McGovern favorably on this, although in a different context, when he said in 1972, running for president, "Come home, America, we can't be policemen of the world." I think that probably is true. And we certainly can't be the policemen of the world without reinforcements. From the end of World War II to the present moment, Europe, or until the fall of the Berlin Wall, Europe had lived under the protection of the American nuclear umbrella, contributing very little to its own defense, but willing to accept largesse from the American taxpayers. Sure, we had an interest in keeping Europe free after being overrun by the Germans twice in the last century and threatened by the communists as well, all in the same century. Yes, we had an interest in that. But I think, you know, I'm one, Beckel and I agree on this, we should have sent Iraq a bill.
That's right.
Yeah.
At least we ought to have free oil for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you know, if we're liberating them and giving them a chance at the democracy they supposedly want, what's in it for us? I mean, why should we just go and American taxpayer pay for all this and not barely get a thank you? So, you know, Afghanistan is extremely difficult. The Soviets found that out, of course. Others have found it out. It's difficult terrain, and again, it gets back to that thing, the three characteristics of a failed society. If you let Al-Qaeda and the Taliban regroup, not only are they going to restore what they have temporarily lost in most of the country, but they're also going to come after us again, as they are. I mean, in Yemen, this whole Arab Spring thing. I wrote a column a couple weeks ago. There is no Arab Spring. It's going to be an Arab winter. The State Department said, no, the Muslim Brotherhood's not involved in Egypt. Now they formed a political party and they're running candidates. Of course they are. See, we don't want to talk about this because we don't want to be called an Islamophobe. Oh, it's basically a peaceful religion. Really? Show me where in the world there are tolerance of other faiths or no faith. Show me where women have equality. Show me, you can't. Even in Turkey, you know, there's a resurgence of Muslim fundamentalism. It is basically a flawed and kingdom of this world religion, where their angry God wants their fate imposed on everybody else, and if you don't accept it, you get your throat cut. That's just a fact. I mean, you know, you can argue that I'm a, you know, bigot and a racist and all this other crap. I don't want to hear any of that. I want you to prove to me that what I'm telling you, I don't say it myself. I'm quoting what they're saying. I get the sermons every week from the Middle East in translation. Kill the Jews, kill the Christians, the Friday people, the Sunday people, the Saturday people. Oh, they're the Friday people. The Saturday people. All this other stuff. You know, we want a caliphate from here to around the world. Everybody dies except us. And by the way, if we get killed in killing any of those other people, we get the virgins and the figs, which is kind of weird. I hear, you know, when Bill Clinton heard about the virgins, he was thinking of converting. I'm not sure. Yes, sir.
Certainly, hyper-partisanship is a real scourge of our age, as
Yeah.
you've mentioned. I'd like to hear more about your reasoning that term limits could help to mitigate that. Could it be as easy as that?
Probably not. Nothing is. People say, well, you have the ultimate term limits in the elections. Well, that's true, except you have a tremendous disadvantage. I forget what the figures are. Bob Beckel has this much better than I do. But it costs somewhere, I think he said, between $5 and $10 million to run for the United States Senate. President Obama has announced a goal, or his people have, of $1 billion for the 2012 election. Now, average people can't run for office unless they're selling off pieces of their soul to every interest group in the world to get that money to run. And then, of course, after you run, within the first week if you're in the House, Washington Post did a piece on newly elected members of Congress several years ago. You get a temporary office in the basement with no windows and everything else, and a phone, a desk, just so you... they found people who had not even taken the oath of office yet, who were already dialing for dollars for the re-election. Hadn't voted on a single piece of legislation, hadn't authored a single piece of legislation, already asking people to contribute for the re-election. Now, I look at that, I say, this is nuts. Whatever happened to serving the people? What about deserving re-election when you haven't even done anything yet? So I think it's a culture of corruption, and a lot of people come. I mean, I see this all the time. You know, the old guys get thrown out. Nancy Pelosi said, "Well, after the Republican sex scandals, well, we got to drain the swamp." Instead, she built a hot tub. I mean, it doesn't matter who's in power. If you stay too long, if you sell too much of your soul, if you're all there with a lot, and I'm not talking about just the obvious stuff or the sexual stuff and all the other, but I mean just a little piece here at a time. You come in with great noble intentions and pure as the driven snow, and we're going to reform government, all this, and then piece by piece by piece, and if you don't sell it, you sell your soul, then, and if you're not defeated, then you're kind of isolated because everybody else is, you see. And it's extremely frustrating. But the key is, still we the people. We cannot continue to treat politics as just a part-time affair. If you're going to send people off to Washington who have the power to tax you and your business, to regulate your life, and to do all to start wars and send your sons and daughters and grandchildren off to fight them, if that isn't sufficient for you to be engaged between elections and what these people are doing, the internet has given us tremendous opportunity to do this now. We can actually find out what our representative, our senator is voting on, or not voting on, or against, and what they're doing. Then, you know, tell me something that's more important than that. So, as we saw in these last two wave elections, the people were engaged, and they said the Democrats weren't doing what they promised. So we put the Republicans in. I think there's a very, very good chance the Republicans will win the Senate next year. The Democrats have 23 seats to defend, the Republicans only 10. But that doesn't solve the problem, as we've seen in the past. Because once one party gets in, becomes a majority, then they become subject to all the same temptations. You know, it's like playing the piano in the whorehouse. Pretty soon you're going to want to go upstairs and see what's going on. You know? I mean, that's what Reagan used to say. You know, politics bears a lot of resemblance to the world's oldest profession, and it has a lot of the same similarities, you know? Cynical, but yes, in the back.
I was intrigued by your idea that we should send Iraq a bill for the trillions of dollars that we've spent over there, but from the perspective of most Iraqi civilians, we spend trillions of dollars dismantling their infrastructure and killing hundreds of thousands of their fellow countrymen.
Excuse me, what infrastructure was that?
Okay, for instance, when we dismantled the army,
yes.
society was highly dependent on the organization that provided.
I agree.
The shambles after that.
Yep, you're right.
So among multiple examples like that, with billing them, would that rely on our making a large investment now in their infrastructure and rebuilding it, or would we just have to stay and make sure that they built a society that would provide the wealth to pay us back? And if so, wouldn't that be policing?